This is turning out to be quite the summer of change at Arsenal Football Club. We're going to talk Tomiyasu, Martinelli, Gabriel Heinze, and some changes behind the scenes at Emirates Stadium. We've got loads and loads. In fact, I can't remember doing a show recently with this many stories to cover. So we'll spend some more time on some rather than others, and we'll get lots of your thoughts and questions from the live chat as well. It's a jam-packed episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, Harry Symeou, and we are live. Let's get into it. Hey, everybody. How are we doing? Welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner Live with me, your host, Harry Symeou. And as I said in the intro there, we've got so much to get into today. We're going to talk about coaching staff appointments. We're going to be talking about changes behind the scenes, technical directors. We're going to be talking about injured players who look as though they've left the football club. A huge interest in Gabriel Martinelli from the Saudi Pro League. We're going to talk Rodrygo. We're going to react to the breaking news around Nico Williams as well. There is so much to get into. There really, really is. As I said, I can't remember a show where I had this many stories on my kind of checklist to get through during one session. But hey, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do our best, and I'm really looking forward to working my way through this one with you guys. We are streaming live on X today as well. We don't often do that, but we are today. I wanted to give some of our ex-followers an opportunity to get a glimpse of what we do here on the Chronicles of a Gooner YouTube channel and podcast. So if you enjoy the show, and I'm not saying you'll know that by now because we've only just started, but if you do, as the show goes on, get into it, enjoy it, you can come over to the Chronicles of a Gooner YouTube channel and subscribe, or you can subscribe to the podcast on all major podcast stores, Apple, Spotify, all the rest of them. Get involved. It really does help. Okay, then. Where should we start? I think I'm going to start by having a very quick rant about something that happened to me last night. I know it's not football related, but I've got to speak to someone about this. I've got to get it off my chest. I had some friends around last night, and I stuck the barbecue on. And as we was in the garden, about 3 doors down from me, this lady opened her window, and she said, "I'm calling the police." I said, "Why?" We weren't loud. We weren't playing music. We were just sitting in the garden. It wasn't even late. It was about, 8 p.m.? She said, "I'm going to call the police." I said, "Why?" She said, "Because you're cooking food outside." I said, "Okay." And she said, "It's illegal." I said, "What? It's illegal to do a barbecue?" I thought, "What?" She goes, "Yeah, I'm calling the police." I said, "No problem. Call the police." Let's see what they're going to say when they turn up to a barbecue. I just found it funny. Like, people have just become so fussy about things. Like, yeah, it's just mad. And the irony of it all, right, was that if there was a little bit of smoke from the barbecue, it was blowing in the complete opposite direction to her house. But apparently barbecues are illegal. So if you live in England, I just want to bring you guys this warning, because I don't want anybody else to get into trouble. Of course, no police came. Not that I'd expect them to respond to such a stupid call if they got it anyway. But yeah, just wanted to let you guys know before we dive into the more important stuff that barbecues in London are now illegal. So yeah, anyway, let's move on. Let's react to some breaking news with regards to Nico Williams. Nico Williams has just signed a new contract with Athletic Bilbao until, wait for it, 2035, a 10-year deal. Now, there's a release clause in that deal from what we're reading and stuff, and I haven't had a great deal of time to kind of dive into this story in more detail, but I will share with you guys my initial reaction and thoughts to this. It felt like, didn't it? He was flirting with so many clubs. It really did feel like this was the summer that Nico Williams was going to move on. All the noises coming out of Barcelona were really positive. You know, we've done the deal. It's only a matter of time. We're just figuring out the details. We're dotting the I's, crossing the T's, etc. And before you know it, Nico Williams will be here playing with his pals, Lamine Yamal and the rest of them, and it will be a super team. It's mad to me that not only is he staying at Athletic Club beyond this summer, but that he signed a 10-year deal. I mean, again, as I say, at the time of recording, I haven't had a look into it or really kind of done much of a deep dive into it to gauge an understanding for maybe what the salary might look like and all the rest of it. But you'd imagine for him to put pen to paper on a deal like that, it's probably big, big money. There is some chat about the release clause as well. And let me just bring up what I was just looking at a second ago. Hold on. I think it was it Fabrizio Romano's page I was looking at? 1 second. Let me just bring it up in front of me. Where is it? Yeah, so the agreement includes a new release clause, which is 50% higher than the 58 million euro one and includes a salary increase. It says the Barcelona deal is off due to registration issues. So Barcelona talking a big game, but couldn't get this deal done. Just couldn't get it done. But anyway, if it's plus 50%, then it's probably another 30 odd million euros on top of the 58. So you're looking at an 80 million euro roughly release clause for Nico Williams. It's not crazy, but the older he gets, and I'm not suggesting for a second that he's old right now and that he needs to be worrying about this in too much detail. But part of the appeal for Nico Williams was that he's a young player and he's still on the right road. And the older he gets, the less willing clubs are going to be to go and meet a massive release clause. So he's done this, I think, very much being okay with just staying at Athletic Club for the rest of his life, because that's what it feels like. He says, when it comes to making decisions, for me, the most important thing is to listen to your heart. I'm where I want to be with my people. This is my home. But was it where you wanted to be a week ago when you thought that Barcelona were going to sign you? That would kind of be my question. So sign a new deal, and it's a massive win for Athletic Club, by the way. But you don't have to play the whole, it was never in doubt. This is where I want to be, and this is where I'm going to be forever card. Come on. We weren't born yesterday. So Nico Williams will not be joining Arsenal or anyone else this summer for that matter, because he has just put pen to paper on a new deal with Athletic Club that will keep him there until June 2035, a 10-year contract. Wow, that is mind-blowing stuff. I should have said this at the beginning. I'm going to say it now. Happy Independence Day to all our American listeners, of which there are plenty. I know the 4th of July is a big day in the American calendar, so wishing you all the best. I hope you all have a wonderful day celebrating. Just wanted to get that in. Okay, let's start with the Arsenal news then. So, Mehmet Ali is leaving his post as the boss of Arsenal's under-21s to take up a first-team role at Brentford. He'll become part of Keith Andrews' staff. And obviously, it's a loss for the football club because Mehmet Ali is a very, very good, bright young coach. And I covered a few of the under-21s games last season, went to a couple as well. And on one occasion, I was sat right behind the dugout at Boreham Wood. And, Boreham Wood is a lower league traditional football ground. You're literally a few meters away from the bench. You could hear every word that he was bellowing out. You could hear every instruction. And just from that, you kind of gauge how detailed someone is in terms of their work, how engaged they are with kind of every aspect of the game as it unfolds. You could hear him sort of passing on instruction because he had spotted things that some of his young players maybe hadn't spotted, movement from the oppositions, like tweaks and changes in formation. And on that particular day as well, I remember the under-21s were struggling in the first half. They were trying to play out from the back, as is the Arsenal way, and they were trying to kind of live and breathe those values and be, as close to what they would be walking into should they end up making progress into the first team, as some have in recent years. And, the way that you kind of watched him in real time, figuring out that problem and then sort of concocting up a solution before then passing that message on to his players in a subtle way, right? Because you don't want to shout out specifics for the opposition to hear and then adjust themselves. it was just fascinating to me how kind of in tune he was with the game. And, you know, he's got a great reputation as a coach. And I think taking up a first team role at a Premier League club is always going to be appealing to someone like Mehmet Ali, who's making his way in the game. And so I wish him all the best. But it is a loss, isn't it? It is a loss for Arsenal, and it is another bit of change. And it feels like this is a real, it's turning out to be a real big summer of change. And I think some of it would have been planned for, some of it would have been, you know, in the pipeline already. And where you got to give Arsenal some credit is that they seem to have been able to kind of succession plan quite well. You think about the big changes we've experienced sort of on the pitch: Partey out the door, Jorginho out the door, Norgard, Zubimendi in. Right, so they've found solutions. How successful or unsuccessful those solutions will be, and whether they can live up to that level remains to be seen. But they've been quick in sort of appointing people. You think about what's happening on the coaching front, you know, not just with Mehmet Ali, but we lost Carlos Cuesta. That was always going to happen, I think, because Carlos Cuesta comes across brilliant. And obviously in that Amazon documentary, although there were lots of things to take away from it, and a lot of the focus was on Mikel Arteta, I remember at the time, a lot of us as Arsenal fans coming away from it and going, that Carlos Cuesta, he's got something about him, hasn't he? And I'm not surprised that he's ended up getting the Parma job. So, you know, he's gone, and Arsenal, and we'll cover this a little bit later on in the show, have moved to appoint somebody in his place. So it's turning out to be a big summer of change on the pitch, off the pitch. And, you know, I don't think you should fear change. I think that you should embrace it at times, because sometimes things run their natural course. Sometimes things come to a natural end. And it's important that you're able to renew and redevelop. Now, change can be scary, but I think if you've got the right people operating at the core of your football club, and I think for the most part we do, then, you know, you shouldn't fear change, and you should trust in those people's abilities to understand what the previous people brought to the job. For example, in Mehmet Ali, you knew what he was bringing to the table if you were close to the under 21s and you were following the development and stuff of those players. And I think it's important that those people then go out, as I say, and bring in the right people and people of similar values and of similar sort of schools of thought to kind of continue that good work. It's not a bad thing to bring in different points of view. And I think that's needed as well at times when you hit a bit of a stagnation. And I'm not going to say we've hit a stagnation, because I don't think that's a fair way of framing it. But obviously, you know, it's been a couple of seasons now, 3 seasons where Arsenal were challenging for the Premier League title. We've yet to get over the line. Went further in the Champions League this year, which was exciting. But maybe in order to take that next step, we need these changes. And maybe these changes are going to be what gets us over the line. So you shouldn't fear change. You should embrace it. But also, you want to stick to your core values and principles, and you want to bring in people that are to a degree like-minded, so that they can continue the good work rather than coming in and trying to rip it all up and starting again. And I think why maybe people don't look at Mehmet Ali as a big loss. And listen, I do personally, but I know from speaking to some friends about this since last night, they've gone, oh, you know, does it really matter? I mean, the under 21s weren't doing that great anyway. When you look at the PL2 table and all the rest of it. But this is where it comes down to understanding the role, understanding the remit and the job at hand, right? Someone like Mehmet Ali is not there to win the Premier League 2. Now, if he can win the Premier League 2, that's great, but that's not his primary focus. His primary focus is to develop and improve players to the point where they can then take those steps into the first team. And if you think about how difficult that job is, and I speak from the point of view of a commentator here, right? Because I've gone to cover Arsenal under 21 matches for Arsenal.com many times. And many times I've done lots and lots of prep around the under 21s, only to turn up and find out that 6 or 7 of the starting 11, they're not actually part of the under 21 squad. They're under 18s that have been pushed forward because we've pushed 21s into the first team in and around the group. Some of them, obviously, like Mars Lewis-Skelly and Ethan Nwaneri, getting opportunities from the start of games. Others just filling up gaps in the squad and getting that experience. but first of all, you're never always working with the same group of players, which makes it tough. But second of all, it's development first and foremost. And winning the Premier League 2 is great, and it shows your academy in a really good light and all the rest of it. But that's not the primary remit, I don't think, of an under-21s boss nowadays. It's about taking players on and taking players forward. So it's a loss, no doubt about that. Who will come in? Not sure. It's going to be interesting. Let's see how that goes. But Mehmet Ali leaving is a blow. It really, really is. Elsewhere, Arsenal's head of recruitment, James Ellis, who joined the club from Fulham back in 2021, is going to be the new technical director and will be working very closely with Andrea Berta, who is expanding the team around him. Now, a few weeks back, maybe even a couple of months ago now, we heard of a link to Matteo Tognozzi, who was working at Juventus, had worked at Girona in the past. He was being talked about as a potential candidate to come in and work alongside Andrea Berta on the kind of recruitment front. It looks like, and this is what the Athletic are reporting, that's not going to happen now. That Tognozzi's arrival is no longer a thing. Don't know what happened. There's no real detail around what exactly went wrong, but those negotiations, those talks that Arsenal were engaged in haven't developed into anything more formal. So Ellis will take on the role of technical director. He was originally a scout, and so the promotion from scout to head of recruitment, that makes sense, doesn't it? He's now got another promotion, and he's going to become the club's technical director. So look, I'd be lying if I said I know a great deal about this person on an individual level and on an individual basis, but he's very, very well thought of, very, very well respected in the game. And his rise has been quite quick. He joined the club, as I said, in 2021 as a scout, ended up becoming head of recruitment, and now is, of course, stepping up to technical director. So another change behind the scenes, and it's going to be interesting to see what sort of impact that has. Look, Berta's still getting his feet under the table. There's a lot of focus on what he's doing in the transfer window, rightly so. People are interested in how Arsenal are going to strengthen. People are interested in this very, very different approach that Andrea Berta has adopted, which is one of going out and speaking to multiple candidates. It's creating lots of noise in the media, lots of chat. And so, yeah, look, him building this team around him, if that's what's going to enable him to do his job to the best of his ability, then great, let it happen. Let's see how it unfolds. But he obviously sees something in James Ellis as well, because if he didn't, he might have pushed harder for the appointment of someone like Tognozzi. Instead, we've gone down that internal route. And I think sometimes that's good because it shows that there's career progression and it makes it an attractive place to be for a lot of people. But sometimes I do think you need fresh ideas. I guess Andrea Berta is the one that's bringing in the fresh ideas, the experience, the know-how. And so putting people in and around him, who know the club, it's probably helpful to him. And I'd rather enable him, given his track record, than someone with a lesser track record, like, with all due respect, James Ellis, because we don't know as much about his track record, do we, as we do Andrea Berta. So just based on that, if we can enable Berta by doing these types of things internally, then great, let's do it. Right, we're going to take a really, really short pause. When we come back, we're going to talk Tomiyasu. We're going to talk Nwaneri's new contract. We're going to talk Mosquera. We're going to talk Gabriel Heinze. And we're going to discuss that interest in Gabriel Martinelli. This is a jam-packed show. I wouldn't be surprised if we run longer than the hour today. So strap yourselves in. We'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, Harry Symeou. Like and subscribe. Yeah, the likes are really, really important. Like, there's over 900 of you with me live on YouTube right now. We've got over 1,000 of you with us live on X right now. If you're on YouTube, leave a like on the video, please. It really, really does help. I'd love to get to 1,000 likes on this video. That would just be amazing. And it helps the channel so much. So I really, really appreciate it if you just take the time to smash that like button. Don't like the chat, like the actual video itself. That's really, really important. Also, subscribe if you're new as we continue on our journey towards the next milestone. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, any reviews would be hugely appreciated. So yeah, get involved. That really, really does help. Okay. I'm about to click. In fact, let me just do it now before I forget, because it's been processing throughout the whole time we've been live, but it's finally processed and it is finally out. The next scouting session video is available on the Chronicles of a Gooner Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a patron, you'll get access to our scouting series. We've got videos so far on Victor Gyökeres, Benjamin Sesko, Martin Zubimendi, Christian Norgard, and we've just released one on Eberechi Eze. So go over to patreon.com/the Chronicles of a Gooner. The link is in the description and you can access that. So yeah, check it out, and really, really appreciate the love and the support. Okay, let's move on to our next story. Let's talk Takehiro Tomiyasu, shall we? I gotta say, this came as a bit of a surprise. It probably shouldn't have, but it did. Takehiro Tomiyasu has left Arsenal after reaching a settlement with the club to terminate his contract last month. His deal was due to expire in 2026 with the option for a further 12 months, but he's not expected to be fit for another 4 or 5 months. And so the decision has been taken to terminate that contract. Takehiro Tomiyasu has left the club. Now, there is interest in him from the Saudi Pro League, as you'd expect there to be. The Saudi Pro League are trying desperately to grow their brand and their product. And I think with Tomiyasu, right, I think this is really a really interesting facet. We'll talk about the player in a minute, because as a player, I think he's a really good player. Really talented. The problem has always been with Takehiro Tomiyasu that he can't stay fit. And I'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. But I think a really interesting aspect that you can kind of look at this from, if you're talking about the Saudi Pro League interest in Takehiro Tomiyasu, is how marketable he is. The commercial value of bringing in a Japanese international who's played in the Premier League, and what that does for the Saudi Pro League in that part of the world, I think is massive. And I think as a result of that, despite his fitness issues and all the problems he's experienced in recent years, I believe that a Saudi Pro League club would be willing to pay big money to Takehiro Tomiyasu, because it will open doors for them in that sense of things as well. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up in the Saudi Pro League. Look, my reaction to this was one of surprise, because I thought that Arsenal would let Takehiro Tomiyasu get back fit before actively trying to move him out the club. I'd said in the past, like, if it were me and I had my ruthless hat on, absolutely, I'm moving on from Takehiro Tomiyasu. And when we've been talking about the Cristhian Mosquera thing, you would have heard me say in recent days that I really do believe that a lot of the reason that we're pushing for Cristhian Mosquera, even when you look at our defense and you probably say that's not the priority area, is because of Tomiyasu. You know, his absence and his injuries have had a real big impact on the squad, not just in terms of us not having him available, but you think about the extra strain his injury has put on Jurriën Timber last season when Ben White was out. Now, someone might argue and say, well, yeah, but it was Ben White that was injured as well, and that was a problem too. But Ben White's not always injured. Ben White's not chronically injured. Takehiro Tomiyasu, unfortunately, has been. And, you know, so we went into a season with him as a part of the plan and a part of our options and a part of our arsenal, if you like, and we just couldn't use him. And for that reason, others are having to play more minutes than they normally would. And, you know, we just got to a point where we can no longer count on Takehiro Tomiyasu. So put your ruthless hat on. This feels like the right decision. Obviously, Takehiro Tomiyasu would have struck some sort of agreement with Arsenal. That means he's not left with nothing. You know, he's going to get his piece of the pie, and he's going to focus on getting himself fit. And then he's going to look at his options. And I'm sure he's going to land somewhere, because he's too good a player not to. He's really unique in that I can't think of too many defenders across the years that I've watched that I could say can play right back, centre back, and left back all to a really high standard. Sometimes you get someone that can play like right back and centre back, or left back and centre back, or centre back and defensive midfield. I genuinely look at Takehiro Tomiyasu and think I can't think of many players that could do all of those roles as well as him. And that's why I think Arsenal gave him longer than they probably would have given to somebody else before taking this tough decision of like, this isn't working. We've got to move on from you. Because I think internally people recognize his value and understand just how sort of important he is when fit, and how useful he can be when fit. The problem is he's not fit, and this is rumbling on and on and on, this injury in particular. I mean, we were kept in the dark over this injury for such a long time, weren't we? Which always set alarm bells ringing in my mind. It always made me think that this is probably more severe than people are letting on. And to the fact that we're hearing now that this agreement has been reached and that he's left the football club, but that he's still 4 or 5 months away from fitness, it shows you, doesn't it, that this was really bad in the first place. And yeah, look, I love Takehiro Tomiyasu as a player. I love his attitude. I love his work rate. I love his commitment. I love his versatility. And I genuinely do wish him all the best. But Arsenal have made the right decision here, because we can't afford to have a salary being paid out to someone that's just never available. And we also can't use up a position in our squad with regards to registrations and salaries and all the rest of it on someone that you just never know when he's going to be fit. So sad news. And it felt, I felt a little bit of a gut punch when I first read it. And I was a little bit surprised when I first read it. But the more you allow yourself to process this, the more it makes sense, doesn't it? So, Takehiro Tomiyasu has left the club. Elsewhere, Arsenal are yet to find a new contract agreement with Ethan Nwaneri, with talks being, as put by James McNicholas of The Athletic, at a delicate stage. His current deal is due to expire next summer, but that's not because Arsenal have mismanaged this. This is because when you sign a pro deal prior to turning 18, now I didn't know this, you're not permitted to sign anything longer than a 3-year deal. So Arsenal have got some work to do here. In part down to the rules and the way that they work. But, if you think about it, saying that the talks are at a delicate stage kind of makes you feel like we're at the kind of make or break point around this. And it kind of reminds me of when Ethan Nwaneri was about to sign that pro deal, and there was lots of interest, wasn't there, from other clubs. And at the time we were looking at it and we're going, will he stay? Will he go? What I'm saying, I'm not saying that Ethan Nwaneri was ever seriously going to go, and I'm not saying that he's going to go now, but I think we should have learned our lesson the first time around, just in that Ethan Nwaneri's quite happy and his people are quite happy to let these things go down to the wire before a decision is made. They don't panic. Sometimes contract negotiations can be a bit of a game of chicken, but in Ethan Nwaneri's case, we've seen him before just kind of not blink and, take it down to the wire so that he can get the best possible deal for himself, for his family, etc., etc. That's absolutely fine. But when we say the talks are at a delicate stage, it does send people into a spiral of panic. I still think he'll sign. I think the general feeling behind the scenes is that he'll sign. And I think we'll get there eventually, because we have to get there. You can't afford to let him become a free agent. He's too talented a player for that. There's lots of interest from elsewhere, as you'd expect. And it's just a really bad look, isn't it? If you nurture this player who's clearly got the talent and the ability to go on and become a real force in an Arsenal shirt in the years to come, to let him walk away because you didn't meet his demands. And I know there's got to be a line, right? And you've got to negotiate smart and within your parameters regarding what you can spend, etc., etc. But I think, for Arsenal, it'd just be a terrible look if they were to let him go. Having said all that, I don't think he will go. I still think we'll get to that solution. But I think when they say this thing's at a delicate point, it kind of means that it's probably cards on the table already. And now it's about, about sort of pushing this and turning it into something more, to quote Fabrizio Romano, concrete. So, we should, I think, hear something on this in the next few weeks. Okay, we're going to talk Mosquera, we're going to talk Gabriel Heinze, and we're going to talk Gabriel Martinelli in part 3. We'll be back very, very shortly. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner Live. Guys, there's over 1,000. There's over 1,100 of you watching us live on YouTube right now. There's only 241 likes on the board. Come on. What are we playing at? We want to get to 1,000 likes. So smash that like button. Doesn't cost a thing. Not the chat, the video itself. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Leave us a review on audio as well. And there's also over 1,300 of you with us live on X right now. Remember, we do not stream every episode to X. In fact, we do it once in a blue moon. So if you fancy taking in the Chronicles of a Gooner on a daily basis, or just whenever you feel like it, come over to the Chronicles of a Gooner YouTube channel, subscribe, or you can find us, of course, on all major podcast stores. So yeah, do join us. Anyway, let's move on. Let's talk Cristhian Mosquera. What's the latest on this then? Arsenal, of course, had a first bid rejected. We know that, but what's the update on the Valencia defender? So according to reports coming out of Spain, Arsenal have had another bid rejected for Cristhian Mosquera. Now, Valencia are said to be holding out for 20 million euros. I don't know exactly what Arsenal have bid, but if you go by some of the reports in Spain, they say that the first bid was around about 10 million euros, which is low balling at its finest, isn't it? And yeah, look, we're going to have to get closer to that 20 million euros mark. I think we're not going to have any problems convincing the player. It feels like that's done. It feels like we've wooed him. What was the phrase, the buzzword used the other day? He's obsessed or seduced by the project, I think is what people were saying. As I say, look, there's a lot of content creators I don't agree with, but one of the things I do agree with is when they highlight some of the words that get wheeled out. Some of the words that get wheeled out during a transfer window. So yeah, anyway, yeah, we got to get closer to that 20 million euros mark. I think with a bit of negotiation, we might meet in the middle. Like it's not late in the window. There's no rush to get this done necessarily. It isn't a player that will be coming in and starting. You wouldn't think at the beginning of the season. So you wouldn't sort of advocate for Arsenal going in like over the top at this stage. I'd bide my time on this one. But yeah, we're going to have to do a bit better, I think, if Valencia are going to let him go. Elsewhere, Gabriel Heinze is joining Mikel Arteta's coaching staff. The former Manchester United and Real Madrid defender is a long-term and very close friend of Mikel Arteta's. That goes back to their time together at Paris Saint-Germain in the 01-02 season. As players, of course, Heinze and Pochettino have been spoken about a lot by Mikel Arteta in terms of being like big influences in his career, people that he continued to be friends with, etc., etc. And I'll give you a little bit of info on Gabriel Heinze and what he's been up to since he's retired first, and then I've got some somewhat uncomfortable thoughts on this. Anyway, he's obviously managed at Godoy Cruz in Argentina, top flight side over there, Atlanta United in the MLS, and his most recent managerial job was at Newell's Old Boys, very, very famous football club. Some unbelievable coaches have been involved with them over the years. And yeah, he's a very explosive / passionate character, Gabriel Heinze. Throughout the last few years, I've seen many clips on social media of him getting animated on the touchline. And what I will say is, I fear for those fourth officials next season that have got to try and contain him and Mikel Arteta at the same time. That is going to be quite the task, quite the job. But yeah, look, passionate for sure. How good a coach is he? Very difficult for me to say because I never sat and watched Godoy Cruz or Atlanta United or Newell's Old Boys for that matter. So for me to sit here and sort of pretend I know lots about Gabriel Heinze as a coach, I don't. What do I remember of him as a player? I remember him being very tough, very streetwise, very solid as a fullback and as a centre-back. Left-sided players. We know that Mikel Arteta loves a left-back, doesn't he? Well, he's brought in another one here in Gabriel Heinze. But I think this is going to be interesting for a couple of reasons, right? First of all, Carlos Cuesta was great. And they are big shoes to fill. And you wouldn't normally think that of a member of the coaching staff leaving. Normally, as fans, I think we brush that stuff under the carpet, but it could be quite significant, couldn't it? Will Heinze's experience as a top level player at the likes of Manchester United and Real Madrid and Argentina help us in terms of bringing that little bit more know-how and help us get over the line? Hopefully. Will that extra bit of passion be nice in terms of refreshing things? Because if those kind of loud rants and like really kind of passionate speeches and stuff are coming from Mikel Arteta all the time, the message can go a little bit stale, right? And so will having someone else who's probably capable of delivering something very similar, will that help us in terms of just keeping it fresh? Maybe it's another angle from which you could look at it. But when I read this, right, because obviously he's been linked with this job before. This hasn't come completely out of the blue. He has been talked about as someone that could join Mikel Arteta's coaching staff in the past. Santi Cazorla has been talked about as well. But I'd imagine, I don't know for a fact, I'd imagine he'd probably want to play a season with Oviedo before retiring, because they're back in the big time. They're back in La Liga. My first reaction when I read this was, of course, Gabriel Heinze's joined. He's Mikel Arteta's mate. And listen, I haven't got a problem with people hiring mates if they're the right people for the job. And I personally don't have any issue with this whatsoever. I'm not going to judge this from now. This is something that we've got to watch unfold over the years, and over the next few months, and we can then make judgments, based on that. And will we see anything different? Will we see tweaks, adjustments? Maybe. Will we be able to attribute those to the new coach? Maybe. It's very, very difficult to know how this is going to go. But I do think when you hire someone that you've spoken about as being one of your best mates for such a long time onto your staff, you are setting yourself up for criticism. Because for a long time, and I've defended Mikel Arteta on this, there's been this notion and there's been this kind of opinion within the fan base that Mikel Arteta gets his way, does whatever he wants, whenever he wants. He's calling the shots at Arsenal. And then we've got to times like January where we clearly needed a striker. He clearly wanted a striker. We didn't get one. And I'm sitting there going, well, no, hold on a minute. Like, you can't pin this on the manager when he's sitting there telling you that he wants a striker. He doesn't make every decision. He doesn't call the shots all the time. And I'm not saying that that's the case because we've signed Gabriel Heinze, that is proof that Mikel Arteta gets his way in every single thing. No, I'm not saying that. But you are setting yourself up here for extra scrutiny because of that relationship that they have. You're setting yourself up for criticism. You're setting yourself up for stick. And if Gabriel Heinze is the right person for the job, Mikel Arteta will look past that and go, you know what? I don't care what people say. I don't care that he's my friend. I really do genuinely believe that he can help us and assist us. And knowing what we know about Mikel Arteta, he is a man of principle. He has taken the club forward. And so I'm inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt on this. But I know that the critics are going to be waiting for an excuse to bring this up. I know that the critics are going to be writing that narrative out right now as we speak. And that is the only downside that I can see right now about Gabriel Heinze coming in as Arsenal's assistant. I think he's going to be blockbuster. I think he's going to be great to watch on the touchlines, on the sidelines. But that's the only downside I can see to this. And I just wanted to put that out there. I just wanted to put it out there. Okay, we're going to take another very, very short break. We're going to talk Martinelli, and then we're going to open up the floor for you guys' questions and thoughts. So, let's get into that now.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Right, let's talk Gabriel Martinelli then. So, according to Ben Jacobs, who, from what I'm told, has really good connections with the Saudi Pro League and in that part of the world, Gabriel Martinelli is wanted by the Saudis, specifically Al Nassr. Apparently, they could offer £70 million plus for the winger. And of course, a move would be partly dependent on what the player wants as well. But according to Ben Jacobs, Gabriel Martinelli and his camp have been aware of the Saudi interest for quite some time. They would have been aware that this had the potential to develop into something more serious. And yeah, there's a chance that Arsenal will be the recipients of a very big money bid for Gabriel Martinelli over the course of this summer. So first of all, let's look at it through the player lens. Do I think that Gabriel Martinelli at this stage in his career wants to go to the Saudi Pro League? Not really. It doesn't strike me as the type. I think he'll still feel that he's got unfinished business at Arsenal. He's clearly well loved at Arsenal. And I don't know of any intention from the Arsenal side of things to sell Gabriel Martinelli. So the bid might come. Doesn't mean it's going to be accepted. Doesn't mean it's going to materialize into anything or develop into a sort of serious situation. What I will say, though, is that £70 million might just be too much. If I were on the Arsenal board, if I were part of the Arsenal hierarchy, if I were Andrea Berta, £70 million might just be too much for me to sort of turn my nose up at. We've had the conversation about Martinelli a lot. Offers loads in terms of energy, work rate, defensive support. His attitude is brilliant. But in the final third, he's missing something. His decision-making is not always there. The execution is not always there. And I do think that a lot of the left winger talk this summer has been fueled by the fact that people are having doubts about whether Gabriel Martinelli is top quality nowadays. In an ideal world, we'd keep him. But in a world where we need to do business in that front line, which is the most expensive business to do, strikers and wingers, they tend to cost more than anybody else because why? They bring the most valuable commodity in football to the table, which is goals, assists, all the rest of it. So there's a part of me that thinks that if, we are sitting here going, we could do with a left winger just to elevate us that little bit more, we'd be stupid to overlook or to turn our noses up at an offer of this value. This is a huge offer for a player that Arsenal paid £6 million for. I don't want to see him go personally, from a purely sort of fan perspective. But if I'm the club, I don't know how I could turn down that sort of money if that offer is to come. Because we got to be really careful with this Saudi Pro League stuff as well, because we've heard of these huge bids coming in the past for various players. And a lot of the time they don't materialize into anything. And a lot of the time that never actually really happens. So I am wary of this. I'm not seeking to discredit Ben Jacobs' reporting. He knows better than me. But I've heard these types of noises around players before. And it doesn't always end up in that, as Fabrizio would say again, concrete offer coming through. So we've got to wait and see what happens with this. But if they're serious, if they put their money where their mouth is, £70 million is a lot of money. And I don't think I'll be able to turn that down for Gabriel Martinelli. I think Rodrygo's an upgrade on Martinelli. And so if that money was to fund the Rodrygo deal and that makes Arsenal better off, why wouldn't you consider that? The problem for Martinelli is that if you then hear that the club are willing to accept that money for you, okay, it's a lot of money. And probably in time, when you look back on it later down the line, you might go, well, yep, you know what, they were right to accept that kind of money because it was crazy money. But that would ultimately, at the time, if you hear that, it would switch you off from the football club, wouldn't it? It would be like, well, whether this move comes about or not, Arsenal are willing to sell me. And that is a very, very different narrative or rhetoric to the one that, I've been sort of provided with in the past or fed in the past. So once those bids come in and they're official and those conversations take place, they have the ability to divide. And that is my worry about this. If we don't want to sell Martinelli and we're not going to sell Martinelli, then all good. But if we're kind of open to it and to the point where we would listen to what the Saudis have to say, and that is relayed to Gabriel Martinelli via the football club or via his agents or whatever, or via the Saudi side of things, that then drives a wedge between Martinelli and Arsenal. And then you might not be getting the best version of Gabriel Martinelli going forward. If the club are steadfast in their response to this, stamp their feet down and go, nope, we are not selling Gabriel Martinelli. He's not for sale at any price. Leave us alone. That could be great for the player. That could spur him on. That could give him that bit extra. So it can go either way. But my personal view on this is that if somebody offers north of £70 million for Gabriel Martinelli, you got to take it. You got to take it. Okay. There's still so much more to get through. This is a crazy, crazy show today. Just a quick reminder, if you haven't done so already, we're on 350 likes now, over 1,200 of you watching. Smash that like button, guys. It really, really does help. Subscribe as well to the channel if you are brand new. All of that stuff really, really does help. There's been so much. There's been so much stuff that I'm like trying to kind of get my head around over the course of the last 24 hours. I think I might have missed one of the stories that is being mentioned in the live chat. So let me just have a quick look. I know Sammy Mockbell put out loads of info yesterday. Ben Jacobs was on the Highbury squad. My great friend Soph's pod, so go over and check that out because there's lots of nuggets of information on there as well. Was there something about Victor Gyökeres from Sammy Mockbell? I'm just scrolling through. Okay, so this is what Sammy Mockbell said. He said, we'll cover this off now. Arsenal are understood to have made headway with a potential move for Victor Gyökeres in recent days. The player is understood to be very keen to join Arsenal. Significantly, the signing of Gyökeres is understood to have Andrea Berta's backing. Gyökeres was not a strong target for Arsenal prior to Berta's arrival, but he believes he could make an instant impact. Should Arsenal sign Sesko or Gyökeres, it is likely to cost them in excess of 70 million. Ollie Watkins would be a cheaper option, allowing them to spend more elsewhere. Nobody wants to hear that. It is understood that Watkins and Gyökeres are the two players Arsenal have explored moves for in recent days. So I got to be honest with the Gyökeres stuff. Some of the sources that have been reporting it, I've been wary of because I don't know much about them. And there is so much nonsense flying around the internet at the moment. It's very difficult, isn't it, to divide up between what's good and what's bad info and all the rest of it. But Sammy Mockbell is great. So if Sammy Mockbell says that Arsenal are understood to have made headways with a potential move for Victor Gyökeres in recent days, that gives me encouragement that that is true. Doesn't mean that a deal is agreed. Doesn't mean that a deal is done. Doesn't mean that our interest in Benjamin Sesko is dead. But it gives you an indication that maybe Arsenal aren't moving forward with Sesko in the way that they'd like. You know, if it was that easy a deal to do and they were willing to pay what RB Leipzig are looking for, this would have been done ages ago because that interest is long-standing. So the longer we don't sign Sesko, basically, the more likely I think it is that we end up with someone like Gyökeres. I think Watkins is probably the third choice. I quite like Watkins. I wouldn't be as upset about it or annoyed about it as a lot of other Arsenal fans would be. But I'd prefer one of Sesko and Gyökeres for sure. So, yeah, let's see what's going to develop on that front over the coming days. Right, it is that time now, the best part of the show, where we take your questions and your thoughts. It can be on anything we've discussed or something completely different. And we'll try and do about a 15, 20-minute Q&A session now as well. I've had so much to get through. I haven't been as across the live chat as I normally am, so I apologize for that. But now I promise you, live chat, you have my undivided attention. Let's get into the Q&A next. Okay, what have you got for me? Let's go over to the live chat box and see what you guys are saying. Okay, Jasper says, isn't it hypocritical to sell Martinelli for 73 million and not be willing to negotiate a 70-80 million pound fee for one of your top striker targets, which is a fair price to me? Well, no, because you'd only be selling Martinelli for 70 million because you think that 70 million is an outrageous amount of money. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, you're not, if you sold Martinelli at 70 million, you wouldn't be going into that going, yeah, you know what, this is a fair price for everybody involved. You'd be saying, no, we would be pulling the Saudi Pro League, PIF, Al Nassr, whoever it is that's actually buying the player. We would be pulling their pants down with 70 million. Hence why we are willing to negotiate and willing to go into this discussion in the first place. So then, if that's your point of view on the bid for Gabriel Martinelli, you can still think that actually 70, 80 million for a striker in Sesko's case, who only got 13 Bundesliga goals last season, that's excessive amounts of money. We don't want to have our pants pulled down the way we'd be pulling the Saudi Pro League's pants down if we did a sale for 70 million quid. So I don't agree with you there, mate. I don't agree with you. I appreciate the question and the comment as always, but personally, I don't agree. Rumble says, what happens if we end up with none of these two? As long as we get a good striker in, I've said it before and I'll say it again. With Gyökeres and Sesko, I like the look of them, right? But I've never been like 100% sold on either. I keep saying it. I think there's a risk in both camps, a greater risk than I'd like to take, ideally, if I'm spending 65, 70 million pound on a forward player. So, you know, we got to wait and see what develops and what happens. Like, for example, I think Watkins is no greater risk than either of those two, but he'd be available at half the price. So it just, it just goes to show you, like, the striker market doesn't feel great at the moment. If it was Alexander Isak, we're talking different story, but we're not, because he's not moving. Despite the rage bait that's been going around trying to convince you all that he's going to Liverpool and that we've missed out recently. I mean, that might happen. I'm not going to predict the future, but it's not happening right now. But he's one of 2-3 strikers in world football for me that, keep saying it, move the needle. Sesko and Gyökeres could, but would I bet my home on that? I probably wouldn't. Lots of questions about the barbecue. Had a little bit of a moan about the barbecue earlier. Just for those of you joining us late. Basically, a neighbor 3-4 doors down from me opened her window last night when I was barbecuing outside. Weren't late. There was no music on, nothing. Just a few friends. There was 5 of us. There wasn't a lot of people. And she opened the window to tell me that she was going to call the police on me because she could smell the food. And apparently barbecuing in London is now illegal. So just wanted to let you guys know so that you don't face similar problems. She told me she's going to call the police. I said, call the police, no problem. But imagine their reaction when they turn up and all I'm doing is cooking a barbecue. But I did as well, because she was getting really wound up. Like, I probably shouldn't have been this sort of petulant, but I did say, would you like me to send you a plate of food, love? To which she kissed her teeth at me and pulled the window shut. Anyway, what was I cooking on the barbecue? Did a bit of everything last night. Bit of chicken, bit of pork, bit of basturman, luganigo, sort of Greek style sausages, and some chef d'aliès as well, Greek style. I don't know how to explain them in English. I'll send you a picture one day. Okay. Curtis Vickers says, Harry, what do you think our chances are of signing a striker before the games at the end of July? Ideally, we'd have done it by now. So there's a part of me that doesn't want to sit here and commit to any timeline, because I don't want to get angry and annoyed about it. But I think that, we should have one in by the... Look, I expect that within the next 2 weeks, we'd have a deal wrapped up for a striker. I would have liked it to have happened sooner. I would like it to happen before we go on the Asian tour. I think that's really important. But we're not making progress with Sesko, by all accounts. We seem to be making progress with Gyökeres, but I don't think he's Mikel's first choice. Are we going to go with that, or are we going to go with something different? I don't know. Bill McClintock says, if we sell Martinelli, then injuries to the new forwards will bring us the same injury issues as last season. Look at the forward strength at City and Liverpool. I agree. It can't just be one for one. But if you bring in Eze, Rodrygo, Gyökeres, and then you've got everything that we have within our ranks already, and you lose Gabriel Martinelli, you're probably okay, because you're losing one, you're bringing in 2, essentially. So yeah, I think we do need to bolster the numbers for sure. Tom says, after the big Tomiyasu surprise, do you think that Arsenal will consider doing the same thing with Jesus in order to free up wages, or would they hope he recovers and then can get a fee next summer? Well, Gabriel Jesus is back training again. I don't know if he's training on the grass and all the rest of it, but we've seen videos of him like going through his rehab and sort of looking quite sharp in his movement and all the rest of it. So I think because he's not a million miles away, I think they're quite happy to kind of reintegrate him with a view to maybe moving him on January or next summer, whatever. But with Tomiyasu, there was so much uncertainty. There was so much mystery around what A, this issue was, and B, how long he was going to be out for. And we've just read with the report that Arsenal have come to that agreement with him and are terminating his contract, that he's going to be out for another 4 or 5 months. So I just think that was just too long to hold on. I think Jesus will be reintegrated, in answer to your question. Adebayo says, don't you think Rodrygo would fuel the left wing better than Martinelli? Fuel the left wing better than Martinelli because he's Premier League proven, but I think Rodrygo will still have to adjust to the aggressive defense in the Premier League. Look, I think Rodrygo will need to adjust and will need to adapt to Premier League football. That's the case for any player coming from any league. Even when you move from one club to another within the same league, there is a period of adaptation. You are going to have to get used to your new surroundings, your new teammates, the patterns of play, etc., etc. You shouldn't be scared of that. I think that the real good top quality players, they find a way to navigate that and they find a way through it, don't they? Raphael says, great show, Harry, watching whilst I'm driving back after a day's work. Safe trip, mate. I hope you're not watching while you're driving and you're just listening. But thank you for the support. Let's take a few more. Finn Muller says, does the Tomiyasu situation show that Berta is more ruthless than Edu and that we're now willing to take tough steps to finally achieve our goals? I think that's a little bit unfair on Edu because Edu was the guy when we got rid of Aubameyang, when we got rid of Ozil, and when we took some really, really tough decisions. And we saw it in the Amazon doc, didn't we? Like Edu, initially, when the whole Aubameyang falling out happened, there was a bit like, whoa, like this guy is our captain and our highest paid player and a really important part of the team. And you're asking me to kind of exclude him. Eventually, he saw Mikel's point. They were on the same page and those decisions were taken. Those were ruthless. That was a ruthless decision. I would argue that was a more ruthless decision than the one with regards to Takehiro Tomiyasu because of who Oba was and his status at the club and everything he'd achieved in the not too distant past. He single-handedly won us that COVID FA Cup. There's no doubt about that. So I think Edu was ruthless when he needed to be. I just think with Tomiyasu, it's probably become more and more apparent over the last few months that he's going to really struggle to recover from this latest injury. There's probably doubts about whether he'll ever be the same player again. There's probably, maybe a little bit more to this, maybe on a personal level. Takehiro Tomiyasu struggling to cope with this mentally because he did go home, didn't he, for a long period of time to recover. I just wonder if, he wasn't great sort of from a mental perspective as well, just because it must be very, very difficult to constantly be injured and to watch your career pass you by while you're sidelined. So I've got a lot of sympathy for the man and the individual there, but I just think I'd imagine that events over the last few months have kind of led to this point. I don't think it's particularly ruthless on Arsenal's part. I think if look, I don't want to say that Edu wasn't ruthless because he made, in my opinion, the most ruthless decision we've seen at Arsenal in the last 20 years. And he helped push that through. I think the Tomiyasu thing, just as the situation's developed, people have realized that he's not going to get back, A, to fitness anytime soon because we're here in 4 or 5 months, and B, he might not be the same player, and in which case we need to replace, renew, refresh. Wesbird says, surely, Harry, in order to compete with in multiple competitions, we need to keep the quality players to give us depth and different options, as that's been an issue over the past seasons. Yeah, but we've also got a wage bill that we need to keep under control. We've got a budget that we need to operate under. There are restrictions and guidelines and frameworks that we need to adhere to. And I think you can't just stockpile players. And I think we've talked a lot about how, if you go back 2-3 seasons ago, Arsenal spent a load of money to kind of get themselves to that place where we could really kind of compete again. And then it felt like there was a bit of a slowing down. But although there was a slowing down, maybe in terms of the outlay on transfer fees, we were renewing contracts and in some cases doubling people's wages. And so, the better you get, the better your players get. And the further along the project you go, the more you have to pay some of the players that have been key and pivotal to the project in the first place. And you're not always going to be able to balance that with more and more and more big money signings. Now, is it the way that we operate? Yes. Are we probably more focused on adhering to regulations, and are we less open to looking for loopholes than maybe some of the other clubs in the Premier League? I think that's probably the case. And could you argue that actually we should stop being the goody two-shoes of the Premier League and instead try and find loopholes and exploit some of those loopholes that so many other clubs are right now in order to... I mean, Chelsea just spend shit tons of money every year. And I was looking at who's got the most headroom in the PSR situation table just the other day, and I couldn't believe they were top of it. So they're finding ways around these things, and maybe that's somewhere that Arsenal could improve. Just, being a bit more savvy on that side of things. Mohadeen says, how much of an improvement is Rodrygo to Martinelli? Martinelli has 54 goals and assists in the last 4 seasons. Rodrygo has 51 goals and assists in league games only. I think he's a big improvement. I do. I think that when you're in a team with Vinicius Jr. and Kylian Mbappe, they are going to dominate. Like, they are going to take the lion's share of the headlines, of the goals, and all the rest of it. I don't really worry about that, to be honest. I think I've seen enough. The eye test takes over for me in this conversation, and so yeah, I think I've seen enough, and the eye test does it for me on Rodrygo. Junior Gunner says, thoughts on Madueke? I think he's very wasteful and would be a step back in the project. With pressure ramping up on Arteta, signing another Chelsea player who underperforms would tip the balance. I agree with that. It's not a great look, is it? Like, people are starting to get agitated by the fact we keep going and signing Chelsea players, and some of them have worked out really well. Some of them, the majority of them haven't, and it is bringing pressure on yourselves for sure. If you go and do that, I also don't think that Noni Madueke is worth the price that is being talked about, which is 45-50 million quid. It might be worth that in another context and in another scenario, in another situation, but given all the other things we've got to do, I'm not sure I'd spend that money on him. Jid says, what makes fans, yourself included, so confident they know the difference between Berta and Arteta transfer moves, especially considering how scouting and transfers are collaborative and these people don't work in silos? I'm just going by the reporting. The reporting that was done by Sami Mokbel said that Andrea Berta was the driving force behind the Gyökeres signing. That's what I'm going with. I don't know for a fact, of course I don't, but I'm going to tend to go with the information from the journalists that I've got a lot of respect for and really, really trust. So, yeah, let's see. You know what? I'm going to take one or two more, I think. What have we got in the live chat? Matt Dyer is asking if barbecues are illegal in London. Mate, I was joking. Just a neighbour complained to me last night that she could smell my barbecue from a few doors down. I mean, she had every single window open, which is fine. But, what do you want me to do? Anyway, ridiculous. What else have we got in the live chat? Let's pick out a couple more before signing off. Can we one last shout for the likes? Nearly nearly at 500. Smash that like button if you haven't done so already. Remember, if you're watching us on X, there's nearly 2,000 of you with us live on X right now. Come over to the Chronicles of a Gooner YouTube channel, subscribe. That way you'll never miss a show. Leave us a like. I've said that already, haven't I? Subscribe. I say it so much, I've lost track of what I'm even meant to be saying. Check us out on Patreon. Our Eberechi Eze scouting video is available now as well. The link is in the description below. Alex, this is a nice question. When did you become a Gooner? Probably from about 3 years old, from as soon as I knew what football was. My dad is a massive, massive Gooner. He gets more animated than me. And yeah, he still is. He's never calmed down, and I don't think he ever will. Not even in his older years. But yeah, I had no choice. I'm glad I am, but I had no choice whatsoever. Yeah, been a Gooner from day one, and it will stay that way, I'm sure. Anyway, right, look, I'm going to leave it there. We've been going for an hour and 5, hour and 6. It's been a pretty jam-packed show. Really, really enjoyed it. The time has flown by. Thank you for all your love, for all your support. As always, I really, really do appreciate it. And I will see you all on the next show. Until then, take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful Friday, and I'll speak to you all on Saturday morning. Until then, take care of yourselves and have a wonderful day. Goodbye.